You're most welcome, dear viewer, to this lesson. I'm glad to join with you. We are going to be discussing our next topic in Primary 6, that is about responsible living in East African environment. We find this on page 81 of our workbooks, Primary 6, as I've already said. And in this very topic, we are going to begin understanding what we call environmental protection. We don't have again to go back to defining environment, because that one I'm so sure we talked about it in primary 3, P4, P5. But if you have forgotten, then we shall still talk about it. Here we have got two words, environmental, then protection. Environmental comes from the word environment, which refers to man's surrounding. Then we have protection. Of course, we are looking at a good care given to the environment in this very particular context. Which means, at the end of it all, we shall be able to define environmental protection as the proper use of the environment. Environmental protection refers to the proper use of our environment. I have said environment simply refers to man and his surrounding, or the surrounding of man, or man's surrounding. We have the components of the environment, which we have the natural resources, whereby we have living things such as vegetation. We have also non-living things like lakes, mountains. And then we also have the man-made components making up the environment. Remember we say things around us. That is environment. So we have those natural ones, then we have the man-made. Which are the man-made? Things like the houses, they are there. Then we have also trees which can be grown by people. Those ones form what we call planted vegetation, planted trees. They also make up that man-made environment. The types, we have a biological environment, which deals with the living things. Types of environment. We are looking at the living environment. Biological environment. Then we shall have the physical environment. The biological environment, we have said, it deals with the things around us which have life. In P3 we are defining living things. You say living things are things which have life. So that one falls under biological environment. Then we have non-living things around us falling under what we call the physical environment. If we are to look at these living things, of course we shall not be able to mention all of them. We have the animals there, we have the birds, we have humans themselves. We have vegetation, these are living things, trees. Then when we come to the other ones which are not living, we shall be looking at things around us, like we have already talked about the buildings, the houses. We shall talk about things like furniture, the timber. We have electronic devices, they are always with us. You are with the television right now in your house, it's with you. It's one of the things around you. So that one does not have life. Pages 83, 82 gives us how to care for the environment. That is caring for our environment. Caring for our environment. How do we care for our environment as semi-candidates? This is what we call environmental. How do we conserve the environment? Number one, we are saying environmental protection, or by having what we call, avoiding destruction of the environment. We can also care for our environment by having sustainable use of the environment, that is, using it without harming. We are looking at having protective measures and good farming methods. Which are these good farming methods? One, practicing what we call afforestation. We can say by afforestation, the environment will be conserved. Number two, by having what we call reforestation. It conserves the environment. Number three, we shall have what we call agroforestry. As a primary 6 semi-candidate, we should be able to define each of these terms. Then we have what we call bush fallowing. Bush fallowing. Before we go to the next ones, afforestation is defined as the planting of trees where they never existed. Whereas re comes from repeat, replace, repeating or replacing, which means this is the planting of trees where they had been or where they have been cut. Sometimes we call it the replacement of the cut down trees. Planting trees in an area where trees were and were cut. Next is we have agroforestry, which we define as the planting of trees together with crops on the same piece of land. And finally we have bush fallowing, which simply means allowing land to rest, giving land a time or a period to rest. Of course, this will help the land to regain its nutrients, to regain its fertility. And this is how we can care for land. Remember, land is part of the environment. We have alternative use of energy, can be another way, through alternative use of energy. Alternative use of energy. Now, what do we mean by alternative use of energy? Here we are meaning using other energy resources instead of those that can lead to the destruction of the environment. For example, you will find that in most families in Uganda, people use wood fuel. What do I mean by wood fuel? Wood fuel, we are looking at the things which are used in as a source of fuel, good from wood. For example, we'll find that people use firewood for cooking, or people use charcoal for cooking, of which you will find that these two things are from what? The wood. Where is the wood from? Trees. That is what we are looking at here. So in urban areas, mainly we have people using charcoal with those charcoal stoves, whereas in villages, people mainly use firewood to cook food, to prepare food. And remember, people have to eat on a daily basis. Not once, not twice. Others eat more than even that. So you'll find whenever a meal is to be prepared, they use the firewood. Where is the firewood from? A tree. So you will find that this has contributed, or this has brought the massive cutting of trees in the country. Not only in Uganda, but we are looking at East Africa in general. But we are giving Uganda as our very own as an example. So you will find that when trees are cut to get wood fuel, this will affect the environment. But we are saying how we protect the environment is by having alternative use of energy. What do we mean? Having other sources to be used apart from wood fuel. Now the question bounces to us. Which are these other sources? Which are these alternative energy sources? One, people can use, for example, people can use electricity. We have seen these cookers and any other gadgets that can. We have these percolators, which people can use to boil water. Instead of you setting a sigiri, instead of you setting a charcoal stove, instead of you setting maybe firewood, putting firewood and you set it so that you can boil the water, you can use that gadget, connect it to the socket, turn the electric power. Turn the socket on. Electricity runs through that gadget and it begins heating up the water. The water boils. Then you using wood fuel. You want to prepare a meal, you want to cook food, you can use the gadgets with electricity. Just connect to the socket, turn the socket on, tap, and you just watch the space. You will see now things getting ready. So that is what we call using other sources, other than us depending on fuel and from the trees, firewood, charcoal, trees are being cut. So when we use electricity, you will find that the trees will no longer be cut for wood fuel. For what now? So that calls for what we call rural electrification. This can be through rural electrification. That is extending electricity to rural areas. Those are villages to villages. So that is another way we can safeguard our environment. That is through alternative use of energy. And then, of course, this one will help to conserve the environment. And then we have the examples of proper methods of farming. We talked about having proper methods of farming. Some of them we have already talked about. Agroforestry, bush fallowing is one of them, whereby a farmer can leave land to rest. And as that happens, the land establishes vegetation. As it regains its fertility, you'll find by the next season now, when you grow the crops, you will be able to get a very high yield. So we have crop rotation, that is alternating crops on the same piece of land, whereby you find when you grow cereals today, maybe in the next season you grow legumes. I hope you learn about leguminous crops, cereal crops, and so on. So you'll find that these are crops which have different abilities in making the soil fertile. For example, we talked of legumes that we say they help to make the soil fertile. So when such crops are alternated, that's what's called crop rotation. Today you have planted groundnuts. They have those root nodules that help and fix the nitrogen to the soil. We have, in the next season, you can grow maybe cereal crops. Of course, the cereal crops will now get the fertility which will be left there by these legumes. So having crop rotation, growing different crops on the same piece of land, will make the soil to get, one, it breaks the life cycle of pests and diseases, makes the soil fertile, and as this happens, you will find the farmer will be able to get good yields. So that's a good farming method. Secondly, we have what we call agroforestry. We have already talked about it. Reducing on the number of animals we rear. This is what we call overstocking. Sometimes it becomes a problem because the animals become too many. You have a limited area to graze them, and at the end of it all, they end up eating all the vegetation, exposing the land to erosion agents. The land remains bare. So reducing on the livestock, controlling soil erosion by terracing through contour plowing. and then strip cropping. These ones are all for controlling soil erosion. Terracing, we say that is the best method for controlling soil erosion in the hilly areas. We have contour plowing the same, and then strip cropping also the same. Page 83 gives us the environmental practices. These are the activities which are done by the people in the environment. And what we need to note is that these practices end up bringing two results. They can end up being good or bad. Those are the environmental practices. The ones that will be good, meaning those are the activities that can make the environment to be safe. If they are bad, we call them negative environmental practices. They lead to the destruction of the environment. We shall be looking at those examples. When man carries out the good activities, of course we have said these positive activities, environmental practices or environmental activities. We have said these activities result into two effects, or they bring out two effects. We have those that will lead to the destruction of the environment, then those that will lead to the protection, positive practices. These are the good ones. Which are these positive practices? We have in our books practices like agroforestry. These ones come back. We may not be able to write all of them here. Reforestation. This one is good. Shall have practices like bush fallowing, leaving the land to rest. We shall have practices like afforestation, we shall have practices like we have put agroforestry, we have bush fallowing, we have practices like afforestation, then addition of fertilizers. That is now under what we call manure. Addition of manure to the soil. We have crop rotation. By the way, you're not put crop rotation. We say this one also helps the garden to continue being fertile. Then on the other side, we shall be having the negative human practices. These were the positive ones. Now we shall go to the negative practices. Negative practices. Now, which are these negative practices? One, we shall have deforestation. Definition, we say this is the massive cutting of trees in an area. Two, lumbering. And it becomes dangerous when it becomes over lumbering. Selective cutting of mature trees for timber, and if it's done on a large scale, I want us to make it as over lumbering. That is the one which is very deadly. It becomes too much on a large scale. Next problem is bush burning, not again bush fallowing this time. It destroys the environment. These are not enough. We shall also be having what we call, we shall have overgrazing here, which moves together with overstocking. So these are some of the problems that can, or these are some of the negative practices that people do in the environment. And of course, the negative practices will affect the environment. Our page 83 still gives us advantages of agroforestry, which we said growing crops together with the trees on the same piece of land. One, a farmer gets double income from the trees and from the crops. Two, a farmer gets the food from the crops, and then you will find that the trees planted can provide shade to the crops in this farm. The trees planted can provide firewood, they can provide herbal medicine to this farmer, and then they can also act as windbreaks. And then, of course, they provide timber, and then the trees help in controlling soil erosion. The disadvantages: one, it requires a large piece of land, it requires skilled labor, it requires a lot of labor, and then the strong wind can break the trees, and when the tree falls, you will find the tree destroying the crops which are down there. So this one becomes also another disadvantage. The crop pests can also become a problem. Crop pests and diseases may not be easily controlled, and sometimes they become a problem to the entire garden. So that is what we have as on page 84. Let's go to page 86, which gives us what we had already talked about, but we want just to put some highlights on it. We talked about alternative energy use. Here, I think let's just make it follow this. Alternative energy use, like I defined, we say this refers to the use of other sources other than wood fuel, as you can see in your book. This is where people use other sources of fuel instead of wood fuel. That I have already given you the examples of wood fuel. We have mainly two, then we have also the third one as sawdust. The examples of other sources that people can use, we have solar, which is from the sun. You find a solar plate is put up or it's exposed to the sun. In most cases, we have these solar plates put on a roof such that they are exposed to the sun and they absorb the sun's heat, the sun's rays. The heat from the sun is absorbed and delivered to the batteries where it is stored, and it can now be used. So that's about solar. We have thermal energy that we use from burning fuel. For example, fuel like coal. We have fuel like petrol can be burnt, like we have a generator, they pour the fuel, then they start it and it produces energy that can be used other than wood fuel. We have biogas from the waste materials. We have geothermal from the hot springs. And then we also have wind energy from the wind. The importance of using other sources. Number one, it keeps the environment clean. I want you to look at the two. We use electricity, then a room where people use firewood for cooking. You will find where the firewood is being used, there is some bit of, there is that smoke from the firewood, and there is where it will stain the kitchen, whatever, making it not to be on that. But when we look at the area where they use electricity, you will find the place is clean because there is nothing like smoke from the firewood, from the charcoal. Just tap it on and the current flows through the gadget and it begins heating up. So it also reduces on the cutting down of trees. Using other sources helps to reduce on the cutting down of trees because there will be no need of using this wood fuel. Then it helps to improve on the climate because now the trees will be left to help in forming rainfall. And finally, it helps to preserve the plants for future. So that is what we have. On page 87, we are given the wood fuel. We are saying the wood fuel refers to the sources of energy we get from the trees. We have firewood, charcoal, and we have sawdust. Then we have the briquettes here. The dangers of using wood fuel: one, it leads to constant cutting down of trees to get more, and this will affect the environment. Number two, it leads to air pollution. Like I said, you find the smoke, even when they are making the charcoal, smoke, even when we are using the charcoal, smoke, when we are using firewood, it's worse. So environmental pollution comes in. The homes of wild animals will be destroyed. Remember, we are using that firewood at home, we are using the charcoal, but that charcoal came from a tree, from a certain forest, which means the trees are being cut and the animals are being displaced. They are being chased. When you clear their homes, they have nowhere to go. They will be going to other places now. Then it leads to soil erosion, and finally, it leads to the reduction in rain formation in an area. We have said these trees help in rain formation through transpiration. Now when they are cut, there will be no other way they can transpire, resulting in the formation of rain. And this will become a challenge, resulting in what we call desertification, meaning the area begins experiencing desert conditions, receiving little rainfall, and with the time it will become a desert itself. We have the ways of conserving wood supply or wood fuel. We have building, using other alternative sources. We have already talked about this. And then using energy saving stoves. We have these stoves that can use at least less charcoal. That one can be better than the other large ones that we need a lot. Then turning sawdust into charcoal by covering what has been cooked. This is to avoid again issues of recooking, like beginning again setting the stove to prepare another meal, and then carrying out afforestation, planting more trees, such that at least even if the other ones are being cut, there are these ones who are being replaced or which are being grown. And of course, we can also have reforestation coming in there, and agroforestry. All this will help to provide more trees, which will help to bring more wood fuel in the future. Page 88 takes us to the opposite of environmental protection, whereby we look at environmental degradation. So we are moving to environmental degradation, which is the opposite of environmental protection. Here, we get degradation coming from the word degrade, which means to lower the quality of something. So when you look at environmental degradation, we simply mean, we can say this refers to the lowering of the quality, lowering of the quality of the environment. That is the meaning of environmental degradation. Like I said, degrade. Degradation comes from degrade, which means lowering the quality of something. We shall have environmental degradation. We can also have land degradation. We can have swamp degradation. When we have such, we look at what has been which quality, whose quality is being lowered, the quality of a swamp. So it comes to what we call swamp degradation. We have land degradation, which means the lowering of quality of land. Here we are looking at environmental degradation, the lowering of quality of the environment. That's how we answer these questions. Now, how is the quality of the environment lowered in an area? This directly takes us to the other negative practices that people do in the environment. Ways of degrading land. Not land, we are looking at environment. So which are the ways through which people degrade, through which people lower the quality of the environment in an area? Through practicing the negative human activities. Which negative human activities? On page 88, we have a lot of them. We begin from deforestation. Deforestation. We talked about overlumbering. By practicing overlumbering, you lower the quality of the environment. By practicing overgrazing, the animals eat up the vegetation in an area, it remains bare, and therefore exposing it to erosion. You have affected the environment negatively. Overstocking comes in. We have bush burning. By bush burning, setting fire to burn the bush. Don't forget, mining is also one of them. Mining, we define it as the getting of minerals from where they exist, or you can say from underground. So an example, if a mineral has been discovered in an area, like they are saying there is gold down there, there is gold in that area. What happens? There has been vegetation growing in that area. There have been trees around that area. So what will happen is there is no way people will just send their hands to pull the gold out. No, they have to dig the gold up, dig it out. As a result, they will begin by cutting the vegetation. If there have been trees, they first put the trees down, the grass, any other vegetation which is around that area. Then now they begin getting that soil. So as they are removing those trees, that vegetation, they are affecting the environment negatively. So mining brings or it leads to environmental degradation or destruction. The other thing you have is what we call industrialization. That is setting up industries in an area. Industrialization. When an industry is supposed to be constructed in an area, of course, the environment has to be destroyed. We have road construction. Road construction also comes in. When a road is supposed to be constructed in an area, they have to cut the vegetation so that they get where the road is to pass. Then we have swamp drainage. Swamp drainage, that is reducing or removing, draining the water from the swamp. The reduction of water from the swamp. And then we have overfishing. Of course, the lakes form what we call the environment. So overfishing is done in water bodies, which will lead to the destruction of the environment. And we have brickmaking, I already talked about. And then we have poaching. Lastly, poaching, which means the illegal killing of animals in game parks. Deforestation. Deforestation is simply defined as the massive cutting of trees, which means the cutting down of trees on a large scale. What are the causes? Number one, people want to get space to construct industries. We have called it industrialization in our books. People want to get space where they can construct a road. People want to get space where they can construct their houses for settlement. People want to get maybe timber. People want to get firewood. People want to get charcoal. So you'll find there are a lot of things that lead to deforestation. Even mining itself, we have said when mining is to take place, people have to clear, first of all, vegetation. They have to put the trees down. So the massive cutting down of trees is what we call deforestation. And then the other problem is getting land for farming. You'll find sometimes some forests have been encroached. People ending up clearing some trees from the forest, and they get that area as their gardens. So the desire to get land for farming also brings another cause of deforestation. What are the effects? Number one, when we keep on cutting these trees down, these trees that would help in rain formation, remember, which means now the area will remain without rain being experienced, and the area will begin experiencing desert conditions. That's why we say it brings desertification. Then number two, it leads to soil erosion. It leads to drought, as there will be no trees to help in rain formation. And then it can bring landslides if it is in mountainous areas. The trees that would hold these soil together, the soil particles together, will be no more. At the end of it all, when the rain pours, it washes the land. It brings the landslides. And then it leads to exhaustion of resources. And then finally, it leads to the displacement of animals, as their habitats will be affected. Ways of reducing deforestation. As we talked about, we can use other alternative sources of energy, like we talked about using other sources of fuel like electricity. And then by encouraging people to plant more trees, that is afforestation and reforestation. And then having what we call controlled population growth. Minimum number, people should not go high in the country. That can be achieved through ensuring or through teaching people on family planning methods such that they don't overproduce children. Because when they overproduce children, these children are the ones who are going to be in the future lacking where to settle, and they end up going to clear forests so that they get areas to settle, to build their house, their houses or homes. So that is another way we can try to reduce the issues of deforestation, having controlled population growth. And then by sensitizing people, that is teaching people on the dangers of cutting down trees. Teaching them that when you cut down a tree, it becomes dangerous because the tree will not be helping in rain formation. And at the end of it all, poor climate conditions. It brings what we call climate change. We shall be talking about climate change in our next discussion. And then we have also, of course, the major causes of environmental degradation. We have issues like overpopulation, people becoming too many, others end up clearing some forests. Unemployment, whereby people don't have jobs. At the end of it all, someone resorts to making charcoal. Someone doesn't have a job, goes to cut a tree, he makes the charcoal, goes to sell as a way of getting money. That one comes as a result of unemployment. And then industrialization, they need to set up many industries in an area. You'll find that these industries will be put in an area which had the vegetation. And then finally, not the least, we have corrupt government officials who may not be able to enforce strict laws. You see, they end up taking bribes and so on. And then the widespread of poverty in the country makes people to destroy the environment. So that is what happens. When the environment is destroyed, it leads to dangers of environmental degradation. It brings prolonged drought. It brings climate change. That's what we shall talk about in the next discussion. And global warming. We shall talk about floods coming in. I think I've mentioned drought already. The soil loses its fertility. It brings what we call land fragmentation. Land being divided into smaller plots by the people. And then it makes the area to experience desert conditions. That's what we have termed as desertification. Also, it leads to extinction of some species, like when you're looking at fishing, it will lead to the exhaustion or extinction of some fish species, or even some tree species when you're talking about trees. Because with the environment, we say we look at all round, whether on vegetation, whether on land, whether on water bodies, whether everywhere. And then pollution comes in. When we meet in the next discussion, we shall be looking at page 90. That will take us to the waste management. Waste management, that is under ways of conserving the environment. I want to thank you so much for your attention in the lesson, and I hope to see you again. May God bless you.